right, we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. My name is Levi Stewart Figueroa, and I'm a senior planner here with the Broward MPO. I'm going to be your moderator this afternoon. Quick little housekeeping items. We will have a Q&A session after the presentation, so please put your questions into the chat box. This session is closed caption enabled. Please click on the closed caption button in your Zoom toolbar and choose the option to show the live transcript. Additionally, those who are visually impaired, the session is compatible with NVDA, JAWS, VoiceOver, and Android TalkBack screen readers. This session is titled Reimagining Streets in South Beach's Art Deco Cultural District. And to make sure everyone's on the same page, South Beach is in Miami Beach here in sunny South Florida. We have one panelist today, José R. González. José is a proven leader in transportation industry with over 26 years of public sector experience. Throughout Mr. González's professional career, he had spearheaded many significant and innovative transportation projects. He first joined the Florida Department of Transportation as a professional engineer trainee and later as an intermodal engineer. He subsequently joined the cities of Miami and Miami Beach, where he led the development and implementation of two of the most successful municipality trolleys in Miami-Dade County. Mr. González is currently the Director of Transportation and Mobility Department for the City of Miami Beach, where he oversees a large portfolio of multimodal projects that prioritize pedestrians, bicycles, and transits over vehicles, with a focus on creating safe streets in Miami Beach. Mr. González is a graduate of Florida International University with a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering, and he's a licensed professional engineer in the state of Florida. In 2018, he received the Governmental Engineer of the Year Award from the American Society of Civil Engineers, as it's been featured in many Miami Today's Best of Transportation series. And I can attest that he's a pretty good boss as well. Prior to moving to the MPO, I had the pleasure of working with Mr. José for about 3 years at the City of Miami Beach. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to José. Thank you. Go, José.
Thank you, Levi. Thank you for the kind words and introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a real pleasure to once again be part of the Safe Streets Summit and to be able to share with you some of the exciting Safe Streets pilot projects that we're currently undertaking in the city of Miami Beach. My presentation is going to focus on our current efforts to reimagine streets in the Art Deco Cultural District. That's the iconic and historic area commonly known as South Beach, which encompasses our historic Art Deco and entertainment district. And it's probably one of the most recognized and photographed and visited parts of the country and perhaps even the world. The goal is to reimagine the streets in the district as places where people, whether they are visitors, locals, or workforce, can spend time, can congregate and enjoy rather than simply a space for cars to travel through. So in this presentation, I'll be sharing not only some of our ongoing pilot projects that we implemented in very short order during the pandemic, but also the long-term transportation vision for the district, which builds upon the very same pilot projects that are in place today. So I'll start with the lay of the land for those of you who are not familiar with South Beach. The district includes 3 avenues that run north and south: iconic Ocean Drive on the east, which is the green line on the right, Collins Avenue, which is the blue line in the middle, and Washington Avenue, which is the red line on the west. The streets span from 5th Street on the south to the historic Lincoln Road pedestrian mall on the north, including Española Way, which is a 2-block pedestrian mall flanked by quaint restaurants on each side. From a visioning standpoint, our starting point was our mobility blueprint, the Miami Beach Transportation Master Plan, which was premised on a modal prioritization which places pedestrians first, bicycles and transit second, and private vehicles last. Our transportation master plan for this area designated Ocean Drive as a pedestrian promenade, Washington Avenue as a rapid mass transit corridor, which aligns with the Miami-Dade County SMART Plan, and that's the regional mass transit plan for the county, and Collins Avenue as a bicycle pedestrian corridor, while permitting vehicular traffic with one lane in each direction and on-street parking. We then looked at the street grid with the goal of creating safe multimodal connections between adjacent neighborhoods and the district to promote residents walking, biking, and even scooting over to the district, and also to create a destination as for locals as well as for tourists. So we're accomplishing this through a network of protected green bike lanes and neighborhood greenways, which are slow streets that are safe and comfortable for pedestrians and bicyclists to travel along and share the road with vehicles because of low traffic volumes at low speeds. The neighborhood greenways are shown on the map as dashed blue lines, and the green protected bike lanes are shown in green. In essence, the goal is for there to be either a neighborhood greenway or a protected bike lane about every couple blocks. We looked at the north-south avenues in the district that I mentioned, and we developed some high-level goals for those streets, such as creating a complete street incorporating transit, bicycles, and pedestrians on Washington Avenue, and that's shown in red, creating flex curb space along Collins Avenue for freight delivery and passenger drop-off zones, that's shown in yellow, and establishing a pedestrian promenade on Ocean Drive by closing it to all vehicular traffic and allowing only pedestrians, bicycles, and other active transportation modes, and that's shown in orange. We arrived at some of these high-level goals for the north-south avenues by comparing the existing design of the road to how the road is actually being used and capitalizing on this as a basis to redesign the streets to prioritize people, bicycles, and transit while continuing to meet the essential needs of the businesses that are along the corridor. So for Ocean Drive, for example, we can clearly see that the road is designed mostly for vehicles, the red slice of the pie on the left. However, there are more pedestrian trips along Ocean Drive today than vehicular trips. That's the green slice of the pie on the right. From this pie chart, we can clearly conclude that Ocean Drive is not designed with people in mind, yet it's one of the most visited and walked streets in Miami Beach and throughout the world. So as a first step, we launched the first of 3 pilot projects at the onset of the pandemic. We closed Ocean Drive to all vehicular traffic and opened it to pedestrians, bicycles, and other mobility devices, and allowed for restaurants to expand their seating to the center line of the street. The bottom image shows Ocean Drive before the pilot, with an ocean of cars constantly cruising up and down the street, which was very challenging from a walkability perspective. And the top image shows the current configuration under the pilot project. These cross sections illustrate the transformation of Ocean Drive from a car-centric street on the bottom image to a pedestrian and bicycle promenade with expanded outdoor cafes on the top image. So far, the pilot has been very successful in terms of attracting people, even in the midst of this pandemic, with a lot of restaurants actually experiencing an uptick in activity after the pilot was launched as compared to before. And more locals are visiting, dining, and exercising along Ocean Drive than ever before. This is a photo of what Ocean Drive looks like today as part of the pilot. Clearly, we've created a more activated, fun, and safer street for people than the old Ocean Drive, which was notoriously famous for cars cruising up and down and pedestrians having to dodge cars to cross. After Ocean Drive, we focused our attention on reimagining Washington Avenue. Washington Avenue is the widest of the 3 avenues, with a 100-foot wide footprint. It's an important street in our transportation network because it connects to the Miami Beach Convention Center. And it functions as a transit corridor with the county's bus service and the city's trolley service operating on it. In fact, about 4,000 passengers use transit daily on Washington Avenue. For these reasons, the county's regional transit plan, called the Strategic Miami Area Rapid Transit Plan, or SMART Plan, as well as the city's Transportation Master Plan, proposed dedicated transit lanes on Washington Avenue. However, despite its current and future role as a transit corridor, 73% of the road is allocated to vehicles and no space is dedicated for bicycle facilities or transit. Again, we see another street in the district that is not designed for its intended use. So we worked with the Washington Avenue Business Improvement District, or the BID, to create a quick build road diet with parking protected bike lanes and parklets. We achieved this by removing one vehicle travel lane in each direction, accompanied by a reduction in the speed limit from 35 to 25 miles an hour to discourage cars and encourage more cycling and walking. Here we see the transformation of Washington Avenue from a car-centric street depicted on the bottom cross-section to a people-friendly and bike-friendly street with parklets for restaurants. I mentioned how Washington Avenue has historically served as the transit corridor in the district. One drawback of the pilot that we implemented was that bus service had to be temporarily relocated over to Collins Avenue, a block away, because of the conflicts that would be created between the bus pickup and drop-off locations and the desired restaurant expansions and parklets and the protected bike lanes, all occurring in a very finite space. So simply put, we couldn't accommodate everything that we wanted on Washington Avenue as part of the pilot. With only one lane in each direction, the impact to traffic flow would be excessive if buses were permitted to stop, pick up, and drop passengers from the single travel lane. Not to mention some ADA concerns associated with buses stopping on the travel lane and not at the curbside. Parking protected bike lanes is actually a novel concept here in South Florida. In fact, Miami Beach is the first city in the region to implement this type of protected bike lane, where the cyclist is shielded from vehicular traffic by parked cars on one side and parklets on the other. So it required some education through signage and aggressive enforcement to ensure that vehicles park correctly, parallel park correctly, and not infringe upon the bike lanes. This is what Washington Avenue looks like today under the pilot configuration, with the parking protected bike lanes configured between the parked cars to the left and the parklets to the right. And it was accomplished as a very simple striping project. In this photo, you could see the old pavement markings on the street covered with black paint and the new white striping for the pilot. Similar to Ocean Drive, the Washington Avenue pilot has been well received by the community and embraced by the businesses along the corridor, which have also expressed to us that they've seen an uptick in revenues after the launch of the pilot during the pandemic. As a matter of fact, in a recent meeting with the Business Improvement District, they mentioned that the pilot actually saved businesses along Washington Avenue because many of the restaurants don't have sufficient indoor seating capacity. And so it was the parklets that really allowed them to become viable during the pandemic. The third pilot that I'd like to share with you is the Flamingo Neighborhood Slow Streets pilot. The goal of an open or slow street is to discourage vehicle traffic from speeding and cutting through a local street and encourage more walking, biking, and other forms of active transportation along that street. The Flamingo Park neighborhood is located immediately west of the Art Deco cultural district that you've just seen, and it's a multifamily residential area in South Beach. The neighborhood has established a goal of becoming the most walkable neighborhood in Miami Beach, and they are well on their way to achieving that because, as it is, they are one of the lowest car ownership areas in Miami-Dade County, where, according to a 2019 community survey conducted by the city, many residents walk and bike as their primary mode of transportation. The neighborhood has a well-connected street grid with a park and a school located in the area. And that's an important factor for a Slow Streets program that's intended to connect residents to essential destinations within the community, such as supermarkets, pharmacies, schools, parks, and other public services. The streets in the Flamingo Park neighborhood have narrow sidewalk, 5 feet wide in most cases. And many sidewalks have landscape encroachments, making it very difficult for even two people to walk side by side along the sidewalks. And there are many conflicts between pedestrians and bicyclists that occur on the sidewalk. So, as we were evaluating different neighborhoods in the city to test for a potential slow streets pilot, the one that jumped out at us, given the scale and the character and context, as well as its proximity to the Art Deco cultural district, was this neighborhood. We initiated the pilot this past October after securing city and county approvals, and we rolled it out very quickly because initially we only had approval for a 30-day pilot. So similar to other cities across the country that also piloted slow streets, our initial deployment consisted of temporary construction signs and construction barricades. And then we also developed a rules of the road sign, given the community's unfamiliarity with the slow streets concept. We worked closely with the community every step of the way. In fact, it was actually a resident who first brought the idea of a slow streets pilot in the Flamingo Park neighborhood to a city commissioner, and the concept just took off from there. So we engaged the neighborhood association and sought input from residents individually by way of electronic surveys. We asked for input on every aspect of the pilot, from concept design to implementation, including the streets that we selected, the design, and the placement of the signs. We realized that the community's buy-in and feedback was so essential to the success of the pilot that we established a group of neighborhood stewards who volunteered to help us monitor and shepherd the pilot on a day-to-day basis. As a result of the neighborhood stewards, we were able to promptly address issues such as damaged, missing, or vandalized signs, for example. I cannot stress enough the importance of community engagement as part of any slow streets pilot. We found it very helpful to organize walkthroughs and bike rides with residents, community leaders, elected officials, and city and county staff to experience firsthand the slow streets and obtain that feedback in the field. We then took that feedback and made any necessary adjustments in the field in very short order. The community events that we held were very well attended and very valuable to achieve the buy-in from the community, to the extent that we were able to secure an indefinite extension to the initial 30-day pilot. The process of refining and tweaking the pilot continues even as we speak, and there have been many lessons learned, some good, some bad, and some downright ugly. Among the most significant lessons learned is the importance of using aesthetic and context-sensitive signs, even on a pilot basis. As you saw previously, our initial deployment consisted of construction signs and barricades to discourage cut-through traffic, signs like road closed and no through traffic signs, which are not aesthetic or contextual for anything other than a roadway project. Similar to other cities, we used those signs for the Slow Streets pilot because they were readily available for quick deployment and at a low cost. Needless to say, we received a lot of criticism for using those signs, even though they were effective in terms of discouraging vehicular traffic from using the slow streets that we designated, which led to a decrease in vehicular traffic and speeds and an increase in bicycle and pedestrian traffic. Based on the lessons learned from the pilots, based on the lessons learned from the pilots, we developed short-term and long-term recommendations for Ocean Drive, Collins Avenue, and Washington Avenue. For Washington, we're working on a solution to bring transit service back as part of the current pilot because it's not working effectively on Collins Avenue where it was relocated to. We believe we can bring the buses back as well as trolleys to Washington Avenue by incorporating modular transit platforms and bus bays to reduce the impact to traffic flow while maintaining space for on-street parking and restaurant expansion. In the long term, Given the generous width of the corridor, we propose redesigning the street by reducing the median to create a complete street with dedicated transit lanes painted red, bike lanes painted green, and on-street parking and parklets as appropriate for the adjacent land uses. For Ocean Drive, which is the green dashed line, in the short term, we're recommending keeping the pilot as is, meaning keeping the street closed to vehicular traffic and keeping the restaurant expansions and the pedestrian bicycle boulevard. In the long term, we're recommending redesigning the street to a single elevation and expanding the sidewalk cafe zones, creating a safe, comfortable, and fully accessible pedestrian and bicycle promenade. For Collins Avenue, which is the yellow dashed line, in the short term, we're recommending creating permit-based freight loading zones with designated loading times for purveyors and implementing a curb management program to maximize the efficiency of the limited curb space based on demand and to properly manage and regulate those curbside operations. In the long term, and as the city advances the construction of proposed parking garages in the area, the on-street parking can be repurposed to create a mix of wider sidewalks, bicycle lanes, and parklets depending on the needs of the adjacent properties. Given all the hotels and restaurants that line Ocean Drive and their dependency on valet, we evaluated potential valet pickup and drop-off locations along the side streets that intersect Ocean Drive. Properly designing the side streets is crucial to maintaining the functionality and services for the hotels and restaurants on Ocean Drive. In the short term, we're recommending relocating the existing movable vehicle barriers that we placed on the side streets for pedestrian safety further west to create space for valet parking operations on the east end of the street ends abutting Ocean Drive. And in the long term, and as Ocean Drive is raised to one level, we can introduce cul-de-sacs with automatic retractable bollards to facilitate vehicle turnaround movements and physically prohibit vehicles, except emergency vehicles, from accessing the pedestrian boulevard. Given the closure of Ocean Drive and the limited street space within the district, we're looking at current delivery operations to develop a plan focused on using smaller delivery vehicles to serve businesses using existing alleyways within the district. Larger box trucks with 2 axles, for example, would load and unload on Collins, not on the side streets. And very large 3-axle trucks would be confined to load and unload on Washington, which is the widest of the 3 avenues. All deliveries would be limited to 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. and prohibited outside of those hours. Our intent is to incentivize purveyors to use smaller vehicles, which are more context sensitive and easier to maneuver within the constrained streets of the district. We're also looking into limiting the times for trash pickup for businesses within the district. So looking at different strategies. For the east-west side streets, in the short term, we're recommending continuing the slow streets pilot in the Flamingo Park neighborhood and implementing green sharrows, which it's a relatively inexpensive enhancement. In the long term, provided the city moves forward with building additional parking garages in the area, we're proposing repurposing the existing on-street parking to create protected bike lanes in order to establish bicycle connectivity to, from, and within the district. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to play a video simulation that illustrates the city's mobility vision for the Art Deco Cultural District. The video will depict many of the concepts that I've mentioned and will paint a picture of what reimagined streets in the district could potentially look like with complete streets, social gathering places, and outdoor activations to create a new and better experience for everyone. We begin on a typical side street approaching Washington Avenue, the western limit of the district. We'll then proceed to historic Collins Avenue and finally arrive at iconic Ocean Drive, the easternmost street in the district that lies next to a beachside park and of course our world famous beach. As we approach Washington Avenue, our vision is to transform it into a complete street that safely accommodates pedestrians, bicycles, and transit. Dedicated transit lanes align with the city's transportation master plan and the Miami-Dade County Smart Plan. We're proposing dedicated green bike lanes on the inside or left side of the street, and it's a configuration that's been endorsed by NACTO, used in Boston and other cities, and reduces conflicts with numerous activities that occur on the outside curb that can adversely affect the safety and operation of the bike lanes. On the left side of the screen, you'll see a parklet. Our goal, of course, is to have a street lined with parklets on each block so that restaurants can expand their seating areas onto the street. However, we may need to retain some of the existing on-street parking for businesses in the short term until additional parking garages are built. Green shower lanes on several low-speed, low-volume side streets, such as this one, will connect cyclists between the adjacent residential neighborhoods and the district. Through a curb management program, we'll limit deliveries to certain times of the day such that on-street parking is retained after delivery hours have expired. We're now approaching historic Collins Avenue, which is full of boutique Art Deco hotels, restaurants, and sidewalk cafes. For Collins Avenue, we're not proposing any major changes to the street itself, except deploying a curb management program to better regulate the uses of the existing on-street parking and the curb space. As we proceed east to Ocean Drive, the side streets will be limited to small delivery vehicles only at designated times and passenger loading zones for most of the day. All street ends will be dedicated to valet service for hotels and restaurants on Ocean Drive. Drivers will drop off their vehicles on the south side of the street and pick up on the north side to minimize conflicts with the valet operations. Automatic retractable bollards will ensure that vehicles cannot access a pedestrianized Ocean Drive while allowing access to emergency vehicles. And now we arrive at the reimagined Ocean Drive, which will be all raised to a uniform grade. To improve the outdoor dining experience, restaurants will relocate their tables, chairs, and umbrellas from the cluttered sidewalks where they are today to the center of the new wide promenade. The space on either side will be exclusively for pedestrians and bicyclists to share. This experience will be augmented by street activations and performances. All proven strategies to enhance economic resilience and quality of life for residents, as well as for the 10 million people that visit South Beach every year. Ultimately, reimagining the district by building on the elements that have made it famous for 100 years to create a new destination where people can come together, socialize, and enjoy the South Beach experience. And with that, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to share our pilot projects as well as this exciting vision for South Beach. And I'll be happy to address any questions you may have.
Thank you, Jose. It's great to see Miami Beach really take a lead here in South Florida, and knowing, how much work went into getting these ideas come, to fruition. It's excellent seeing them actually happen now, even in a pilot. So hopefully a lot of people on the line will be able to duplicate this in other cities here in South Florida. We're going to go ahead and start taking questions, guys. There's a chat box at the bottom of the screen. If you want to enter your chat questions there, we will get to them. We do have one question, and that is, have you guys thought about using cargo bikes for delivery?
We have, and many restaurants and outdoor cafes are currently using cargo bikes already, mopeds as well. So that's already happening, and quite a bit of it, a lot of activity.
Great. So being in a historical area, what, if any, pushback did you receive, and how were you able to get consensus to implement these projects? And specifically, was there any pushback from any historical preservation group?
In terms of pushback, we're quite fortunate. We really did not receive a lot. I think the pandemic really, shall we say, it really brought people's desire to be outdoors, right, and to be able to social distance in a way that we've never seen it before. And so the communities were actually asking us, please, do something. But what was happening is that we have a very popular beach walk that, that essentially it goes from the southernmost point of our city to the northernmost point along the beach. And you get some really beautiful views from this beach walk. But it's only so wide, right? It varies, between 15 to let's say 25 feet wide. What was happening was that the beach walk was just, it was getting so full of people that a lot of people were concerned because there was very little social distancing that could be practiced along along the beach walk and other shared use paths. We have sidewalks that are very narrow as well here in the city. So the community was really clamoring for government to do something. So when we when these ideas came about to pedestrianize Ocean Drive and create a protected bike lane on Washington Avenue and slow streets on Flamingo Park neighborhood, I mean, everyone, they wanted it done, immediately. Uh, of course, everything takes time because there is a process, even for pilots down here in Miami-Dade County. There is a process and there are certain approvals that need to be secured. So, that's a necessary evil, as they say, but it was expedited. And so everything was rolled out in very, very short order. I mean, some some residents have said that it looked like it was overnight. It really wasn't overnight, although it appeared to be done overnight. There was a lot of behind the scenes, developing plans, permitting that had to get done, even, on an expedited basis, but it still needed to get done. So we actually received very little pushback. We're very fortunate.
Great. So our next question is data being collected? And if so, what type? And how is the success of these pilots being documented and communicated to the City Commission?
Sure, definitely. We are collecting data. It's an essential part of every pilot. It's important to have pre-data, and we had a lot of that. We had a lot of pre-pandemic data, and then we collected data during the pandemic as part of these pilots. And it goes without saying that collecting data during a pandemic is probably not the best time, and we all know that. But it's really, we felt we had to do it regardless, because we knew that if we implemented these pilots, we would see a change, and somehow, some way, that had to be documented. So each of the pilot is very unique, right? Because it introduces different features and enhancements onto the streets. So we developed criteria for each of the streets. In general, the criteria include safety. We work very closely with our police department. If we see an uptick in accidents, and we receive that information practically in real time. So if we start seeing upticks in conflicts or close calls or accidents, then we're sure to take some quick action. The other criteria that we use is usage. How is it being used? So we use some of our consultants to collect data, bicycle data, traffic data, pedestrian data, to try to gauge usage, because that's an important one. And then customer satisfaction was another one that's also very important. And these three criteria are common to all three of the pilots. And then we have some other criteria that's specific to each of the pilots. But yes, we are periodically, I would say about every 90 days, we're collecting data and comparing the data. We're in close communication with our county, Miami-Dade County, which ultimately has jurisdiction of all traffic control on all streets in Miami-Dade. So we're in close contact with them, and we're sharing information. But we do hope that, and based on what we've seen from the data that we've collected and the evaluation, that the pilots have been successful. For Washington Avenue, for example, we've seen over 500 bicyclists on an average on an average day, and that was a corridor that had very little bicyclists on a daily basis because it did not have a dedicated bicycle facility. It had simply a sharrow.
So the next question is, what is an anticipated implementation of long-term design for Ocean Drive?
I'm sorry, Levi, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the anticipated
Anticipated
schedule to implement the
schedule.
long-term design of Ocean Drive.
Sure. Well, one of the things we've done, because the reimagining of Ocean Drive it involves more than just the mobility aspect. Certainly, the mobility aspect is an important aspect, but it involves land use regulations. It involves parking, different parking strategies. So the city engaged a planning consultant to conduct a comprehensive, holistic vision exercise. We shared with that consultant, the plans that I just shared with you, and I think a lot of people here in the city are on that page. But ultimately, the consultant will come back to us with some recommendations, and hopefully those recommendations include pedestrianization of Ocean Drive, because it has been quite successful. So we're working with that consultant. I would say probably in about less than a year. I want to say probably 6 months to 1 year. I think there's going to be a plan that will be shared with the city commission and the policymakers, and then we'll go from there.
Great. And since Ocean Drive has been closed, has there been any significant traffic delays or congestion on Collins and Washington and other side streets?
We have seen, yes, we have seen an uptick in traffic congestion, primarily on Collins Avenue. Washington Avenue had 2 lanes in each direction. Now it only has 1. Ocean Drive had 1 lane in each direction. Now it's totally closed to cars. So we have definitely reduced capacity, vehicular capacity, along those streets in the district. And Collins Avenue, which was the street that we really did not make any major changes to, has, I think, taken the brunt of it. It's also where we relocated the transit service to. So on top of all the cars in 1 lane, traveling along 1 lane in each direction, now you also have buses that are stopping and going. So we have, and that is why we do feel it is important to ultimately bring transit back to Washington Avenue, which is really what our transportation master plan and the county's regional transit plan states. And ideally, we would want transit on Washington to be along a dedicated lane and increase the capacity of the corridor that way.
Okay, and we have time for one more question. So what happens to the pilot when we're out of the pandemic, when traffic levels are normal and people are back in their cars? How do we keep this going?
That's an excellent question, Levi. That's what we call the $1 million question, right? If I only had a crystal ball, I don't think we know. Some of these pilots do not have a definitive termination date. They have check-in points. So every so often, say every 30, 60 days, we check in with the county, we check in with the community, we check in with our policymakers to see how things are going. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because the pilots have been effective and they've really taken off. They're very popular, with the community. So to a certain extent, I know there are a lot of folks that don't want to see them go away, but then on the other hand, there are folks that say, well, when things go back to normal, where are cars going to go through? And perhaps we need to stop worrying about cars. Where are cars going to go through, and where are people going to go through? Because that's really the question. Going back to normal doesn't always mean going back to something that was right. And I think this pandemic, if anything, it forced us to think outside the box, to be innovative, to be quick, and to be creative. And hopefully some of these things that we've implemented during the pandemic will outlive the pandemic, because they really have nothing to do with the pandemic. That may have been the impetus, if you will, but they really, there's no reason why they cannot outlive the pandemic. And certainly, I know my team, myself, that is what we're advocating for. We're advocating for the types of streets that I've shared with you today that, are safe and convenient, comfortable for people and not just cars.
Perfect. Thank you, Jose. Thank you for
You're
sharing
welcome, Levi.
all of that with us. We're, having worked in Miami Beach for 3 years and going to Miami Beach all the time, bringing my 2 little boys, we are super excited and love what you guys have done and looking forward to making it permanent. Thanks everyone for participating today. Don't forget, there is an evaluation on Cvent. There's a link in the chat. If you could please do that for us. And if there are any other questions, enter them in the chat box as well. We can try and get them answered for you via email or however we have your registration. So thank you. Have a wonderful day and enjoy the rest of our Safe Street Summit.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.